Human civilization didn't suddenly appear one day like magic. Instead, it grew slowly from a perfect combination of geography, climate, and technology that came together in a specific region of the ancient Near East about 12,000 years ago. This transformation would completely change how humans lived, creating patterns of society, innovation, and culture that still influence our world today. Picture two mighty rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, flowing roughly parallel through what we now call Iraq, Syria, and southeastern Turkey. These twin waterways, originating in the Armenian highlands and meeting near the Persian Gulf, created a unique environment that would prove essential for humanity's shift from wandering nomadic groups to permanent settlements. These rivers carried something far more precious than just water. Massive amounts of fertile sediment, eroded from the mountainous regions upstream, traveled with the flowing waters. During seasonal floods, these rivers deposited layers of nutrient-rich soil across the surrounding plains, creating some of the most fertile farmland on Earth. This annual cycle of flooding and soil deposition transformed what would otherwise be dry, barren land into a green corridor of exceptional productivity. The deposits contained essential minerals including nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, creating soil so rich it could support intensive farming without any need for additional fertilizer. The geographic positioning of this land between the two rivers created natural boundaries that both protected and connected early settlements. The rivers served as highways for moving goods, people, and ideas across great distances, while the surrounding deserts and mountains provided barriers against potential enemies and controlled where trade routes could pass. The change from wandering hunter-gatherer groups to permanent farming settlements didn't happen overnight. Archaeological evidence shows this process, known as the Neolithic Revolution, unfolded gradually between about 10,000 and 8,000 BC. During this time, small bands of hunter-gatherers who had previously followed seasonal migration patterns began establishing semi-permanent camps near reliable water sources and areas with naturally growing wild grains. These early settlers had detailed knowledge of their environment, accumulated through generations of seasonal movement and careful observation. They understood the growth cycles of wild wheat, corn, and barley, recognizing which varieties produced the largest seeds and grew most reliably. This plant knowledge proved crucial as they began domesticating crops, selectively harvesting and replanting seeds from the most productive specimens. Establishing permanent settlements required fundamental changes in how people organized themselves and lived their daily lives. Hunter-gatherer bands, typically consisting of 25 to 30 people, had to develop new methods for sharing resources, resolving conflicts, and dividing up work. Building permanent structures demanded specialized knowledge of construction techniques, while storing surplus grain required developing new technologies for preservation and protection against pests and moisture. Early settlements in this fertile region reveal increasingly sophisticated building techniques. Houses made from mud brick and stone foundations replaced temporary shelters constructed from animal skins and wooden frames. These structures featured multiple rooms, storage areas, and specialized spaces for food preparation and craft production. The standardization of building techniques and the emergence of common architectural elements suggest the development of shared cultural practices and technical knowledge. The accumulation of agricultural surplus fundamentally changed social relationships within these early communities. For the first time in human history, not everyone needed to participate directly in food production. This freedom from constant food gathering enabled people to develop specialized crafts, including pottery production, textile weaving, and tool manufacturing. Archaeological sites from this period reveal increasingly sophisticated ceramic vessels decorated with intricate geometric patterns and designed for specific purposes. The role of climate change in making this transformation possible cannot be overstated. The end of the last ice age about 11,700 years ago started a period of global warming that dramatically changed precipitation patterns and seasonal temperature variations across the Near East. The retreating glaciers released vast quantities of fresh water, raising sea levels and creating more stable river systems with predictable flood cycles. This climate shift eliminated many environmental uncertainties that had previously made permanent settlement impractical. Seasonal temperature changes became less extreme, extending growing seasons and enabling multiple harvests per year in favorable locations. Increased rainfall in highland regions fed the river systems more consistently, providing reliable water sources for both drinking and irrigation. The warming climate also expanded the range of wild plant species that could serve as potential crops. Archaeological botanists have identified numerous varieties of legumes, including lentils, peas, and chickpeas, that became available for cultivation as temperatures rose and growing seasons lengthened. These protein-rich crops complemented cereal grains, providing more complete nutrition and enabling larger populations to be sustained on smaller areas of cultivated land. Population growth during this period created both opportunities and challenges for early agricultural communities. Larger settlements could support more specialized workers, leading to technological innovations and increased productivity. However, they also required more sophisticated systems for managing resources and coordinating social activities. Archaeological evidence suggests that some communities reached populations of several hundred individuals by 8000 BC, requiring new forms of leadership and decision-making processes. The proto-urban center of Tel Es Awan, located along the Tigris River in central Iraq, provides remarkable insight into the sophistication achieved by these early agricultural societies. Occupied between about 6000 and 5500 BC, this settlement covered nearly 6 hectares and supported an estimated population of 1,000 to 1,500 people. The site reveals evidence of planned urban layout with residential areas separated from craft production zones and public spaces. Excavations at Tel Es Awan have uncovered extensive irrigation systems that demonstrate advanced hydraulic engineering capabilities. These installations included primary canals that diverted water from the Tigris River, secondary distribution channels that carried water to individual field plots, and sophisticated drainage systems that prevented waterlogging and soil salinization. The precision of these constructions suggests the existence of specialized engineers who possessed detailed understanding of water flow dynamics and soil management techniques. The irrigation infrastructure at Tel Es Awan required coordinated labor efforts involving hundreds of individuals working under centralized direction. Archaeological evidence indicates that canal construction and maintenance were organized as community-wide projects, with different households contributing specific types of labor based on their specialized skills. This level of coordination implies the existence of formal leadership structures and standardized work practices that extended beyond individual family units. Craft specialization at Tel Es Awan reached levels of sophistication previously unknown in human societies. Pottery workshops produced standardized vessel forms using advanced techniques, including the potter's wheel and controlled kiln firing. These ceramic products were not merely functional, but displayed artistic elements including painted decorations, sculptural details, and symbolic motifs that suggest the development of shared cultural meanings and aesthetic values. Textile production at the site involved the cultivation of flax and the domestication of sheep for wool production. Archaeological remains include spindle whorls, loom weights, and fabric impressions preserved on clay surfaces, indicating the production of woven textiles in various patterns and qualities. The standardization of textile production techniques and evidence for surplus production suggests that these goods were traded with other settlements across considerable distances. The settlement of Chogamami, located in the Diyala River Valley east of Baghdad, represents another crucial example of early urban development in Mesopotamia. Occupied between approximately 6000 and 5500 BC, this site demonstrates even more advanced irrigation technologies and urban planning concepts. The settlement was organized around a central plaza surrounded by residential compounds, each containing multiple structures arranged around internal courtyards. The irrigation system at Chogamami included innovations that would become standard features of Mesopotamian agriculture for millennia. Engineers constructed check dams across seasonal watercourses to capture and redirect floodwaters, while elaborate canal networks distributed this water across extensive field systems. Archaeological surveys have identified irrigation channels extending more than 10 kilometers from the main settlement, indicating the ability to manage water resources across vast agricultural territories. The agricultural productivity achieved at Chogamami supported population densities that approached those of later urban centers. Plant remains recovered from storage facilities include not only cereal grains, but also dates, figs, and other tree crops that required long-term agricultural planning and investment. The cultivation of date palms, in particular, demonstrates sophisticated understanding of agricultural techniques, as these trees require several years to mature and produce fruit. Evidence from Chogamami also reveals the emergence of social stratification based on differential access to resources and specialized knowledge. Residential compounds varied significantly in size and architectural sophistication, with larger structures featuring more elaborate decorative elements and greater numbers of storage facilities. These differences suggest that some individuals or families had accumulated greater wealth and social status, possibly through control of irrigation systems or specialized craft production. The technological innovations developed at these early urban centers had profound implications for subsequent human development. The irrigation techniques pioneered in Mesopotamia enabled agricultural production in regions previously considered unsuitable for farming, dramatically expanding the geographic range of human settlement. The organizational systems developed to manage these complex agricultural projects provided models for political administration that would influence governmental structures throughout the ancient world. The transition from hunter-gatherer societies to agricultural settlements also initiated fundamental changes in human relationships with the natural environment. Rather than adapting to existing ecological conditions, agricultural communities began actively modifying their surroundings to increase productivity and support larger populations. This shift from adaptation to manipulation would characterize human-environmental relationships throughout subsequent history, with consequences that continue to shape our world today. The development of surplus agricultural production created the economic foundation for all subsequent forms of social complexity. The ability to support non-agricultural specialists enabled the emergence of full-time craftsmen, religious practitioners, political leaders, and military forces. These specialized roles, in turn, facilitated technological innovation, cultural development, and territorial expansion that would characterize the great civilizations of the ancient world. The geographic advantages of the Tigris-Euphrates river system continued to attract human settlement and technological innovation throughout the prehistoric period. The combination of fertile alluvial soils, reliable water sources, and natural transportation corridors created conditions that supported increasingly large and complex societies. The agricultural techniques and social organizations developed during the Neolithic Revolution provided the foundation for the emergence of the world's first true urban civilizations in the 4th millennium BC. The sophisticated agricultural settlements of the 7th and 6th millennia BC established the technological and social foundations for an unprecedented transformation in human organization. By 4000 BC, the accumulated innovations in irrigation, craft production, and social coordination had reached a critical threshold that enabled the emergence of genuinely urban societies. The descendants of the early farmers at Tel Esarwan and Chogamami would witness the birth of the world's first city-states, marking humanity's transition from agricultural villages to complex urban civilizations. The Uruk period, spanning from approximately 4000 to 3100 BC, represents the most significant developmental phase in human social organization since the Neolithic Revolution. During these 9 centuries, the alluvial plains of southern Mesopotamia became the stage for revolutionary changes in settlement patterns, technological capabilities, and administrative systems. The transformation was not gradual but occurred with remarkable speed, suggesting that critical innovations in one area sparked rapid development across multiple aspects of society. The city of Uruk itself emerged as the prototype for all subsequent urban centers. Located on the banks of the Euphrates River in what is now southern Iraq, Uruk grew from a modest agricultural settlement to a sprawling metropolis covering more than 600 hectares by 3200 BC. Archaeological evidence indicates that the city supported a population of approximately 50,000 inhabitants at its peak, making it by far the largest human settlement that had ever existed. The sheer scale of this urban concentration required entirely new approaches to resource management, social organization, and territorial control. The physical layout of Uruk reveals sophisticated urban planning principles that would influence city design throughout Mesopotamian history. The settlement was organized around two primary religious complexes: the Anu precinct, dedicated to the sky god Anu, and the Eanna precinct, associated with the goddess Inanna. These sacred areas occupied elevated positions within the city and featured monumental architecture constructed from millions of mud bricks. The famous White Temple, built atop a massive artificial platform called a ziggurat, stood approximately 13 meters above the surrounding plain and could be seen from distances of several kilometers. The construction of these monumental buildings required organizational capabilities that exceeded anything previously achieved in human history. The White Temple alone incorporated an estimated 1,400 tons of limestone and bitumen materials that had to be transported from quarries located hundreds of kilometers away. The labor requirements for such projects involved coordinating the work of thousands of individuals across multiple construction seasons. Archaeological analysis of brick stamps and construction techniques reveals standardized production methods that enabled different work crews to contribute compatible components to the overall structure. The residential areas of Uruk displayed clear evidence of social stratification based on differential access to resources and proximity to religious centers. Elite compounds near the temple complexes featured multi-room houses constructed around central courtyards with specialized areas for food preparation, craft production, and storage. These structures incorporated architectural elements including decorated doorways, internal drainage systems, and private wells that distinguished them from more modest dwellings in peripheral areas of the city. The economic foundation of Uruk's growth rested on agricultural intensification achieved through expanded irrigation systems and improved crop varieties. Archaeological surveys have identified irrigation canals extending more than 20 kilometers from the city, creating an agricultural territory capable of supporting the urban population. These waterworks incorporated sophisticated engineering features including sluice gates, settling basins, and branch channels that enabled precise control over water distribution. The management of such extensive infrastructure required specialized knowledge and coordinated administration that exceeded the capabilities of traditional kinship-based social organization. The city of Ur, located approximately 300 kilometers southeast of Uruk, developed along similar lines, but with distinct characteristics that reflected local environmental conditions and cultural preferences. Founded around 3800 BC, Ur was positioned near the confluence of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, providing access to both riverine transportation and marine resources from the Persian Gulf. The city's location enabled it to serve as a crucial link in emerging trade networks that connected Mesopotamia with distant regions including the Iranian Plateau, Anatolia, and the Indus Valley. Archaeological excavations at Ur have revealed evidence of remarkable technological sophistication in metallurgy and craft production. The Royal Cemetery, dating to approximately 2600 BC, contained artifacts that demonstrate mastery of advanced metalworking techniques, including granulation, filigree, and complex alloy production. Gold helmets discovered in royal burials were constructed from single sheets of metal hammered into intricate forms that replicated woven textiles. Silver vessels featured decorative elements created through repoussé techniques that required specialized tools and extensive technical knowledge. The city of Eridu, traditionally considered the oldest settlement in Mesopotamia, occupied a unique position in early Sumerian civilization as the legendary seat of divine authority. Archaeological evidence indicates continuous occupation from approximately 5400 BC, making it one of the longest inhabited sites in human history. The city's religious significance stemmed from its association with Enki, the god of fresh water and wisdom, whose temple complex grew through successive rebuilding phases into one of the most impressive architectural achievements of the early urban period. The temple sequence at Eridu provides crucial evidence for understanding the evolution of Mesopotamian religious architecture and administrative practices. The earliest shrine, constructed around 5000 BC, was a simple rectangular structure measuring approximately 3 by 4 meters. Over the subsequent millennia, This building was repeatedly demolished and rebuilt on an increasingly grand scale, with each new iteration incorporating architectural innovations and expanded functional areas. By 3000 BC, the temple complex covered more than 2,000 square meters and included specialized areas for ritual activities, administrative functions, and storage of religious offerings. Lagash emerged somewhat later than the other major Sumerian cities, but quickly developed into one of the most powerful and influential city-states of the early urban period. Located in the eastern portion of the Sumerian heartland, Lagash controlled extensive agricultural territories irrigated by waters from both the Tigris and Euphrates river systems. The city's strategic position enabled its rulers to regulate trade routes connecting central Mesopotamia with the Iranian highlands and the Persian Gulf region. The administrative archives discovered at Lagash provide unprecedented insight into the complexity of early urban management systems. Thousands of clay tablets record transactions involving agricultural products, craft goods, labor assignments, and religious offerings. These documents reveal sophisticated accounting methods that tracked resources with remarkable precision, including calculations of field productivity, livestock inventories, and workshop output. The level of detail preserved in these records indicates that urban administrators possessed mathematical skills and organizational capabilities that enabled them to manage economic activities across vast territories. The revolutionary invention of writing emerged directly from the administrative needs of these expanding urban centers. The earliest known writing system developed at Uruk around 3200 BC as a practical solution to the challenge of tracking complex economic transactions and resource allocations. Initial experiments with symbolic representation began with simple pictographic signs carved into clay tablets using reed styluses. These early symbols represented concrete objects and quantities. A drawing of a sheep indicated sheep, parallel lines represented numbers, and combined symbols recorded transactions involving specific quantities of particular commodities. The transformation from pictographic to logographic representation occurred rapidly as scribes discovered more efficient methods for recording complex information. Rather than drawing detailed pictures of objects, they developed simplified symbols that could be quickly inscribed in wet clay. The physical properties of clay tablets influenced the evolution of these symbols. As curved lines were difficult to produce cleanly in the medium, scribes began using combinations of straight lines and wedge-shaped marks that could be impressed rapidly and uniformly into the clay surface. The development of syllabic writing marked a crucial breakthrough that enabled the recording of abstract concepts, personal names, and grammatical elements that could not be represented pictographically. Scribes discovered that symbols originally representing concrete objects could also represent the sounds of those words when spoken. This rebus principle allowed them to construct written versions of complex spoken language by combining symbols that represented syllabic sounds rather than specific meanings. The cuneiform writing system that emerged from these innovations possessed remarkable flexibility and expressive capability. Scribes could record not only economic transactions, but also legal documents, religious texts, historical narratives, and literary compositions. The standardization of signed forms and writing conventions enabled communication across different cities and regions, facilitating the development of shared cultural practices and administrative procedures throughout the Sumerian world. The establishment of formal governmental structures represented another fundamental innovation of the early urban period. Traditional kinship-based leadership systems proved inadequate for managing the complex social and economic relationships that characterize city-state societies. The concentration of large populations in urban centers created new forms of social conflict that required institutional mechanisms for resolution, while the coordination of large-scale construction projects and agricultural systems demanded centralized decision-making authority. The institution of kingship emerged as a solution to these organizational challenges, though early Sumerian political systems retained important limitations on royal authority. The earliest rulers, known as functioned primarily as temple administrators and representatives of divine will rather than absolute monarchs. These priest-kings derived their legitimacy from their role as intermediaries between human communities and the gods who were believed to own the city and its surrounding territory. The Lugal, or big man, represented a different form of leadership that emerged during periods of military conflict or crisis. Unlike the Un, whose authority derived from religious sanction, the Lugal gained power through demonstrated military capability and success in protecting the community from external threats. Over time, successful Lugal rulers consolidated their authority and established hereditary dynasties that combined both religious and military functions. The development of legal codes and administrative systems reflected the need for standardized procedures to manage increasingly complex social relationships. The earliest known legal documents from Sumerian cities established principles for resolving disputes over property ownership, commercial transactions, and personal injury. These codes recognized different categories of social status and prescribed specific penalties for various offenses, creating formal alternatives to traditional methods of conflict resolution based on kinship obligations or personal revenge. Administrative systems developed to support urban governance incorporated sophisticated methods for record-keeping, resource allocation, and personnel management. Temple complexes functioned as the primary administrative centers, employing hundreds of scribes, accountants, and supervisors who maintained detailed records of agricultural production, craft manufacturing, and trade activities. These bureaucratic institutions created career paths for educated individuals and established professional standards that ensured continuity of administrative practices across generations. The military institutions and administrative systems that emerged during the early urban period operated within a complex religious framework that permeated every aspect of Sumerian society. The gods were not distant, abstract entities but active participants in daily life who owned the cities, controlled natural forces, and determined the fate of individuals and communities. This intimate relationship between divine and human realms created a theological system that legitimized political authority, organized economic activity, and provided meaning for the unprecedented social transformations occurring throughout Mesopotamia. The Sumerian pantheon reflected the hierarchical nature of urban society, with major deities controlling specific domains of existence and maintaining relationships that mirrored earthly political structures. At the apex of this divine hierarchy stood Anu, the sky god whose authority encompassed the heavens and established the fundamental order of the universe. Anu's position as king of the gods provided the theological foundation for human kingship, as earthly rulers claimed to derive their authority from divine appointment and to serve as representatives of cosmic order on earth. The god Enlil occupied a crucial position as lord of the air and executor of divine decisions. Unlike Anu, whose authority remained largely theoretical, Enlil actively intervened in human affairs through control of wind, storms, and agricultural fertility. His temple complex at Nippur served as the religious center of Sumer, where representatives from all major city-states gathered to acknowledge his supremacy and seek divine approval for important political decisions. The concept of divine mandate that legitimized royal authority throughout Mesopotamian history originated from Enlil's role as the god who bestowed kingship upon worthy human rulers. Enlil's authority extended beyond political legitimation to encompass the practical management of agricultural systems that supported urban civilization. Seasonal floods, rainfall patterns, and crop fertility were understood as manifestations of his will, making the maintenance of proper ritual relationships with this deity essential for community survival. The timing of agricultural activities, the construction of irrigation systems, and the distribution of surplus production all required divine sanction obtained through elaborate ceremonies conducted at his temples. The god Enki, master of fresh water and divine wisdom, provided the technological knowledge that enabled human civilization to flourish in the challenging environment of southern Mesopotamia. Unlike other major deities who maintained some distance from human concerns, Enki was portrayed as actively benevolent toward humanity, providing the skills and knowledge necessary for urban life. The arts of irrigation, metallurgy, brewing, and textile production were all attributed to his divine instruction, making him the patron of craftsmen and engineers whose specialized knowledge supported urban economies. Enki's association with fresh water gave him particular importance in the irrigation-dependent agriculture of Mesopotamia. The complex canal systems that distributed river water across vast agricultural territories were understood as earthly manifestations of his divine domain. The technical knowledge required to design and maintain these waterworks was considered sacred wisdom that could only be obtained through proper ritual relationship with the god. Master engineers and hydraulic specialists served as priests in his temples, combining practical expertise with religious authority. The goddess Inanna occupied a unique position within the Sumerian pantheon as the deity of love, fertility, and warfare. Her dual nature reflected the complex realities of urban life, where creative and destructive forces operated in constant tension. As goddess of fertility, she ensured agricultural abundance and human reproduction that sustained growing urban populations. As goddess of warfare, she provided divine sanction for the military conflicts that characterized relationships between competing city-states. Inanna's association with both love and war reflected sophisticated theological understanding of the interconnected nature of creative and destructive forces in human society. The same divine power that ensured agricultural fertility and human reproduction could be channeled toward military conquest and territorial expansion. This theological framework provided religious justification for the aggressive expansion policies pursued by successful Sumerian rulers who claimed to act as instruments of divine will. The goddess's prominent role in Sumerian religion also reflected the relatively high status of women in early urban society. Unlike later Mesopotamian civilizations, where female deities were subordinated to male gods, Inanna maintained independent authority and actively challenged other divine figures. Her mythological adventures, including her descent to the underworld and her conflicts with other gods, provided models for human behavior that emphasized personal agency and the pursuit of individual goals within established social structures. These major deities were supported by hundreds of minor gods and goddesses who controlled specific aspects of daily life. From household activities to specialized crafts, each profession, each neighborhood, and each family maintained relationships with particular divine patrons who provided protection and assistance in exchange for proper ritual observance. This elaborate theological system created multiple layers of divine authority that paralleled and reinforced the complex social hierarchies of urban civilization. The architectural expression of this religious system reached its most impressive form in the monumental temple complexes known as ziggurats. These massive stepped pyramids dominated the skylines of Sumerian cities and served as both religious centers and symbols of civic achievement. The Great Ziggurat of Uruk, constructed during the 21st century BC under the patronage of King Urnenmu, exemplifies the sophisticated engineering capabilities and religious devotion that characterized these remarkable structures. The ziggurat rose approximately 30 meters above the surrounding plain through 3 distinct terrace levels, each constructed from millions of mud bricks manufactured according to standardized specifications. The lowest level measured roughly 64 by 46 meters at its base and stood 15 meters high, providing a massive foundation for the upper levels. The second terrace measured approximately 48 by 32 meters and added another 8 meters of height, while the uppermost level supported a temple structure dedicated to the moon god Nanna. The construction techniques employed in the ziggurat demonstrate remarkable understanding of structural engineering principles and material science. The builders incorporated drainage systems within the structure to prevent water damage from seasonal rains and flooding. Bitumen waterproofing protected vulnerable joints and surfaces, while woven reed mats placed between brick courses provided flexibility that allowed the massive structure to settle evenly without cracking. The exterior surfaces were covered with fired brick facades that provided weather protection and created impressive visual effects through varied colors and textures. The interior of the ziggurat contained a complex network of chambers, corridors, and staircases that served various religious and administrative functions. Storage rooms held offerings brought by worshippers, while specialized chambers housed the ritual equipment and sacred objects used in temple ceremonies. Administrative offices within the structure accommodated the large staff of priests, scribes, and servants required to maintain temple operations and manage the extensive economic activities associated with religious institutions. The Great Ziggurat served not only as a religious center, but also as a powerful symbol of political authority and economic prosperity. The massive scale of the structure demonstrated the city's ability to mobilize enormous resources and coordinate complex construction projects. The sophisticated engineering and architectural details showcased the technical capabilities of craftsmen and engineers. The permanent visibility of the ziggurat across the surrounding landscape proclaimed the city's dominance over its agricultural territories and subordinate settlements. The temple complexes associated with ziggurats functioned as integrated economic institutions that managed substantial portions of urban wealth and agricultural production. The Temple of Nana at Uruk controlled approximately 3,000 hectares of agricultural land worked by dependent laborers who received rations in exchange for their services. Temple workshops produced textiles, metalwork, and other craft goods that were traded throughout Mesopotamia and beyond. The institution maintained herds of cattle, sheep, and goats that provided meat, dairy products, and raw materials for various industries. Temple administrators developed sophisticated accounting systems to track the complex economic activities under their control. Thousands of cuneiform tablets from temple archives record transactions involving agricultural products, craft goods, labor assignments, and ritual offerings. These documents reveal mathematical capabilities that enabled precise calculation of field productivity, workshop output, and resource allocation across multiple economic sectors. The standardized accounting methods developed by temple bureaucracies provided models for commercial and governmental record-keeping throughout Mesopotamian civilization. The relationship between temple economies and secular governance created complex institutional arrangements that varied significantly between different city-states and historical periods. In some cities, temple administrators functioned essentially as government officials who managed public resources under royal supervision. In others, religious institutions maintained substantial independence and competed with secular authorities for control over economic activities and political influence. The city of Lagash provides detailed evidence for the intricate relationships between religious and secular economic management. During the 24th century BC, the Temple of Ningirsu in Girsu controlled extensive agricultural territories and manufacturing workshops that generated substantial surpluses for the city-state. However, secular officials appointed by the ruler also maintained independent administrative systems that managed royal lands and collected taxes from private citizens. The two institutions cooperated in major construction projects and military campaigns while competing for influence over trade policies and resource allocation decisions. Temple priests occupied crucial positions within these economic systems as specialized administrators who possessed both religious authority and technical expertise. The management of large-scale irrigation projects required detailed knowledge of hydraulic engineering, seasonal weather patterns, and soil conditions that was preserved and transmitted through temple schools. The coordination of craft production demanded understanding of manufacturing techniques, quality control standards, and market conditions that enabled temples to compete effectively in interregional trade networks. The educational systems operated by temple institutions created professional classes of scribes, accountants, and administrators whose skills were essential for urban governance and economic management. Temple schools taught not only religious texts and ritual procedures, but also mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and legal principles. Graduates of these institutions staffed both religious and secular administrative positions, creating shared professional standards and cultural values that unified the educated elite across different institutional boundaries. Religious festivals and ritual celebrations provided crucial mechanisms for integrating diverse urban populations and reinforcing social hierarchies within city-state societies. The New Year festival at Babylon, which lasted for 11 days during the spring equinox, involved elaborate processions, dramatic performances, and communal feasting that brought together citizens from all social levels. The king played a central role in these ceremonies, performing ritual acts that symbolically renewed his divine mandate and demonstrated his continued fitness to rule. During the New Year celebration, the king underwent ritual humiliation before the god Marduk, surrendering his royal regalia and submitting to symbolic punishment for any failures during the previous year. This ceremony served multiple functions. It demonstrated royal accountability to divine authority, provided a controlled outlet for popular criticism of governmental policies and created dramatic tension that heightened the significance of the king's ritual restoration to power. The successful completion of these ceremonies confirmed divine approval for continued royal authority and renewed the cosmic order for another year. Similar festivals throughout Mesopotamian cities combined religious observance with political theater and economic activity. Sacred marriage ceremonies reenacted mythological unions between gods and goddesses while celebrating the fertility of agricultural lands and human communities. Harvest festivals marked the completion of agricultural cycles and provided occasions for redistributing surplus production to urban populations. Military victory celebrations honored gods who had provided divine assistance in warfare, while displaying captured wealth and prisoners that demonstrated royal success. The concept of divine kingship that emerged from these religious practices fundamentally shaped political development throughout Mesopotamian history. Unlike Egyptian pharaohs, who were considered actual gods, Mesopotamian rulers were understood as mortal representatives of divine authority who derived their legitimacy from proper relationship with the gods. This theological framework created both opportunities and limitations for royal power, as kings could claim divine sanction for their policies while remaining subject to divine judgment for their actions. The theological framework that legitimized Mesopotamian kingship operated alongside revolutionary technological developments that would fundamentally transform human civilization. While priests interpreted divine will and kings claimed celestial mandate, craftsmen and engineers were developing practical innovations that solved pressing challenges of transportation, agriculture, and trade. These technological breakthroughs emerged from the accumulated experience of generations of skilled workers who refined their techniques through systematic experimentation and careful observation of natural phenomena. The invention of the wheel around 3500 BC represents perhaps the most significant transportation revolution in human history. Though its development occurred through incremental improvements rather than sudden inspiration, archaeological evidence suggests that the concept originated from the potter's wheel, which Mesopotamian craftsmen had been using since approximately 3800 BC to create symmetrical ceramic vessels. These early potter's wheels consisted of heavy stone discs that rotated on vertical axles, enabling artisans to shape clay with unprecedented precision and speed. The transition from potter's wheel to transportation device required solving complex engineering challenges related to axle construction, bearing systems, and load distribution. Early wheels were solid wooden discs cut from single tree trunks, with holes drilled through their centers to accommodate wooden axles. These primitive wheels were extremely heavy and generated substantial friction, limiting their effectiveness for long-distance transportation. However, they proved invaluable for short-distance movement of heavy materials within urban construction sites and agricultural areas. The development of spoked wheels around 3000 BC marked a crucial advancement that dramatically improved transportation efficiency. Sumerian craftsmen discovered that wheels constructed with wooden spokes radiating from central hubs could support equivalent loads while weighing significantly less than solid disc wheels. This innovation required sophisticated understanding of structural engineering principles, as the spokes had to be precisely positioned and securely attached to distribute weight evenly across the wheel's circumference. The construction of spoked wheels demanded specialized woodworking techniques and tools that pushed Mesopotamian craftsmanship to new levels of precision. Artisans developed bronze saws, chisels, and boring tools that enabled them to create standardized wheel components with consistent dimensions and tolerances. The assembly process required careful measurement and fitting to ensure that completed wheels would rotate smoothly and maintain structural integrity under heavy loads. Master wheelwrights emerged as highly valued specialists whose expertise commanded premium compensation and social recognition. The integration of wheeled vehicles into Mesopotamian transportation systems revolutionized trade relationships and military capabilities throughout the region. Two-wheeled carts pulled by domesticated donkeys could transport loads of grain, textiles, and manufactured goods across distances that would have been impractical for human porters. Four-wheeled wagons provided platforms for moving massive stone blocks and timber beams required for monumental construction projects. The standardization of wheel sizes and axle dimensions enabled the development of road systems with consistent track widths that facilitated interregional commerce. Military applications of wheeled technology produced the war chariot, a revolutionary weapons platform that transformed battlefield tactics throughout the ancient Near East. Early Sumerian chariots were heavy, four-wheeled vehicles that served primarily as mobile command posts and platforms for archers. The solid wooden wheels and crude suspension systems of these early chariots limited their speed and maneuverability, but they provided psychological advantages through their imposing appearance and elevated positions for commanders and elite warriors. The development of lighter, two-wheeled chariots with spoked wheels around 2500 BC created genuine cavalry units that could maneuver rapidly across battlefields and pursue fleeing enemies. These vehicles required specially trained horses rather than donkeys, as their greater speed and agility demanded animals with superior strength and endurance. The breeding and training of war horses became specialized occupations that contributed to the emergence of aristocratic warrior classes throughout Mesopotamian society. Parallel to these developments in land transportation, Mesopotamian engineers were revolutionizing water-based travel through innovations in boat construction and sailing technology. The earliest vessels were simple reed boats constructed by binding together bundles of marsh reeds with rope made from plant fibers. These lightweight craft proved effective for navigating the shallow channels and marshy areas of the Tigris-Euphrates delta, but they lacked the structural integrity required for long-distance travel or heavy cargo transport. The development of wooden boat construction techniques around 3200 BC enabled the creation of larger, more durable vessels capable of extended river voyages and coastal navigation. Sumerian shipwrights learned to shape wooden planks and join them with wooden pegs and bitumen caulking to create watertight hulls. These early wooden boats featured flat bottoms that enabled navigation in shallow waters while providing stable platforms for cargo and passengers. The revolutionary invention of the sail transformed these improved boats into efficient long-distance transportation systems that could harness natural wind power. The earliest sails were simple square sheets of woven fabric suspended from horizontal poles, but even these primitive designs enabled boats to travel upstream against river currents or across open water without relying entirely on human rowing power. Archaeological depictions from around 3100 BC show Mesopotamian vessels equipped with both sails and oars, providing flexible propulsion systems that could adapt to varying wind and water conditions. The development of more sophisticated sailing techniques required detailed understanding of wind patterns, water currents, and seasonal weather variations. Mesopotamian sailors accumulated extensive knowledge of navigation principles through generations of practical experience, learning to read natural signs that indicated favorable conditions for different types of voyages. This expertise enabled them to establish regular trade routes connecting Mesopotamian cities with distant regions, including the Persian Gulf, the Levantine coast, and the Indus Valley. The construction of larger sailing vessels capable of maritime voyages demanded advances in shipbuilding technology that pushed Mesopotamian craftsmanship to new levels of sophistication. Seagoing ships required reinforced hull construction, improved waterproofing techniques, and specialized rigging systems that could withstand the stresses of ocean travel. Master shipwrights developed standardized construction methods that enabled the production of vessels with consistent performance characteristics and structural reliability. These transportation innovations facilitated the expansion of trade networks that connected Mesopotamian cities with resource-rich regions throughout the known world. Wheeled carts and sailing ships enabled merchants to transport bulk commodities across vast distances, making it economically feasible to obtain materials that were not available locally. Copper from Cyprus, tin from Afghanistan, cedar wood from Lebanon, and precious stones from India all flowed into Mesopotamian markets through these improved transportation systems. Simultaneously with these transportation breakthroughs, Mesopotamian farmers were developing agricultural technologies that would increase crop yields and expand the range of cultivable land. The invention of the plow around 3500 BC represented a fundamental advancement that enabled cultivation of heavier soils and larger field areas than had been possible with simple digging sticks and hoes. Early plows were basic wooden implements that scratched shallow furrows in prepared soil, but they significantly reduced the labor required for field preparation and enabled farmers to work larger areas within optimal planting seasons. The development of ox-drawn plows around 3000 BC multiplied agricultural productivity by harnessing animal power for field cultivation. These improved implements featured bronze-tipped plowshares that could cut through root systems and break up compacted soil more effectively than wooden points. The use of domesticated cattle as draft animals required new techniques for animal training, harness construction, and field management that transformed traditional farming practices. Mesopotamian farmers discovered that systematic plowing could improve soil fertility by burying crop residues and weeds that decomposed to provide nutrients for subsequent plantings. The practice of cross-plowing, where fields were cultivated in perpendicular directions, broke up soil clods more thoroughly and created better seedbed conditions. These techniques enabled farmers to maintain productive agriculture on the same fields for extended periods without the need for lengthy fallow periods that had characterized earlier farming systems. The integration of plowing with improved irrigation techniques created agricultural systems capable of supporting much larger urban populations than had been possible with earlier farming methods. Mesopotamian engineers developed sophisticated field layouts that combined drainage channels, irrigation ditches, and plowed furrows in coordinated systems that optimized water distribution and soil management. These integrated agricultural technologies enabled the cultivation of extensive territories around major cities, providing the food surpluses necessary to support specialized craftsmen, administrators, and military forces. The mathematical knowledge required to design and implement these complex agricultural and transportation systems led to revolutionary advances in numerical calculation and geometric measurement. Mesopotamian mathematicians developed the sexagesimal system based on the number 60, which provided more flexible calculation methods than earlier counting systems based on 10 or 12. This base 60 system enabled precise division of quantities into multiple fractional parts, making it particularly useful for distributing resources, calculating areas, and measuring time intervals. The sexagesimal system's mathematical advantages stemmed from 60's numerous divisors, which include 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, 20, 30, and 60. This abundance of factors enabled Mesopotamian mathematicians to perform complex calculations involving fractions without requiring decimal notation systems that would not be developed until much later in mathematical history. Practical applications included calculating field areas for taxation purposes, determining material quantities for construction projects, and dividing inheritance shares among multiple heirs. The influence of sexagesimal mathematics extended far beyond practical calculations to establish measurement standards that continue to shape modern life. The division of hours into 60 minutes and minutes into 60 seconds derives directly from Mesopotamian mathematical traditions that proved so useful they were adopted by subsequent civilizations throughout the ancient world. Similarly, the 360-degree circle reflects sexagesimal principles, as 360 represents 6 times 60 and provides a highly divisible unit for measuring angles and directions. Mesopotamian astronomers applied these mathematical tools to systematic observation of celestial phenomena, creating the world's first scientific approach to understanding planetary motions and seasonal cycles. The predictable movements of the sun, moon, and visible planets provided natural laboratories for testing mathematical theories and refining calculation techniques. Astronomical observations also had practical applications for agriculture, navigation, and religious ceremonies that required precise timing of seasonal events. The development of lunar calendar systems around 3000 BC enabled Mesopotamian societies to coordinate agricultural activities, religious festivals, and administrative functions according to predictable temporal frameworks. Early lunar calendars were based on the approximately 29.5-day cycle of lunar phases, with months beginning at each new moon. 12 lunar months created years of roughly 354 days, which gradually fell out of synchronization with seasonal agricultural cycles that followed the 365-and-a-quarter-day solar year. Mesopotamian astronomers solved this calendrical problem by by developing sophisticated intercalation systems that added extra months at regular intervals to maintain alignment between lunar and solar cycles. These adjustments required precise mathematical calculations and long-term astronomical observations that demonstrated remarkable scientific sophistication. The resulting calendars provided stable frameworks for organizing complex urban societies while maintaining connection to natural cycles that governed agricultural productivity. The creation of accurate calendar systems facilitated the development of long-term planning capabilities that were essential for urban administration and economic management. Government officials could schedule construction projects, military campaigns, and tax collection activities according to predictable temporal frameworks. Merchants could coordinate trading expeditions with seasonal weather patterns and agricultural harvest cycles. Religious authorities could maintain consistent festival schedules that reinforced social cohesion and cultural identity. Solar calendar systems, developed somewhat later, provided even greater precision for agricultural and administrative planning. Mesopotamian astronomers discovered that the solar year contained approximately 365.25 days by carefully tracking the sun's position relative to fixed stars over extended observation periods. This knowledge enabled them to predict seasonal changes with remarkable accuracy and to develop planting schedules that maximized crop yields by taking advantage of optimal growing conditions. The integration of solar and lunar calendar systems created complex chronological frameworks that served different functions within Mesopotamian society. Lunar calendars remained important for religious observances and social activities that followed traditional monthly cycles. Solar calendars provided more accurate frameworks for agricultural planning and long-term administrative scheduling. The ability to convert between these different temporal systems required mathematical sophistication that further advanced Mesopotamian computational capabilities. Metallurgical innovations during this period revolutionized tool production and established the technological foundations for subsequent Bronze Age civilizations. Mesopotamian craftsmen had been working with native copper since approximately 4500 BC, learning to shape the malleable metal through hammering and basic heating techniques. However, pure copper's softness limited its effectiveness for cutting tools and weapons that required harder, more durable materials. The discovery of bronze production around 3500 BC represented a breakthrough that transformed metalworking from a specialized craft into a major industry. Bronze, an alloy of copper and tin, possessed superior hardness and durability compared to pure copper while remaining workable through casting and forging techniques. The production of bronze required access to tin deposits, which were relatively rare and often located far from copper sources, creating the need for extensive trade networks that connected Mesopotamia with distant resource regions. The establishment of these long-distance trade relationships for metal procurement created some of the world's first truly international commercial networks. Mesopotamian merchants developed trade routes extending from Afghanistan, where tin deposits were abundant, to Cyprus and Anatolia, which provided high-quality copper ores. These trading expeditions required sophisticated logistical planning, diplomatic negotiations with foreign rulers, and financial arrangements that could support extended commercial ventures. The complexity of bronze production also necessitated advances in furnace technology and metallurgical techniques that pushed Mesopotamian craftsmanship to new levels of precision. Bronze casting required careful temperature control and precise alloy ratios to produce tools and weapons with consistent quality and performance characteristics. Master metalworkers developed specialized techniques for creating complex shapes through lost wax casting processes that enabled the production of intricate decorative objects and precisely engineered mechanical components. The sophisticated metallurgical techniques and international trade networks that emerged from Mesopotamian innovation created the technological and economic foundations for unprecedented political transformation. By 2400 BC, the accumulated wealth from bronze production, long-distance commerce, and agricultural intensification had concentrated sufficient resources in the hands of ambitious rulers to support military campaigns extending far beyond traditional city-state boundaries. The stage was set for the emergence of the world's first multi-ethnic empire, an achievement that would fundamentally alter the political landscape of the ancient Near East. Sargon of Akkad emerged from obscurity around 2334 BC to establish the most extensive territorial dominion the world had yet witnessed. Unlike previous Mesopotamian rulers who had contented themselves with hegemony over neighboring city-states, Sargon conceived and executed a systematic campaign of conquest that brought diverse peoples and regions under unified imperial administration. His origins remain shrouded in legendary accounts that describe his discovery as an infant floating in a reed basket on the Euphrates River, but historical evidence indicates he began his career as a cupbearer to Urzababa, king of the Sumerian city-state Kish. Sargon's rise to power coincided with increasing tensions between Sumerian city-states and Semitic-speaking populations who had been gradually infiltrating Mesopotamia from the surrounding desert regions. These Semitic groups, known collectively as Akkadians, had adopted many aspects of Sumerian civilization while maintaining their distinct linguistic and cultural identity. They served as merchants, soldiers, and administrators within Sumerian cities, but remained politically subordinate to established Sumerian elites. Sargon's genius lay in recognizing that this growing Akkadian population could provide the military and administrative foundation for a new form of political organization that transcended traditional city-state boundaries. The conquest of Uruk around 2334 BC marked the beginning of Sargon's imperial campaigns and demonstrated the military innovations that would enable Akkadian success. Rather than relying on traditional Sumerian tactics that emphasized heavily armored infantry fighting in tight formations, Sargon deployed mobile forces equipped with composite bows that could engage enemies at longer ranges while maintaining tactical flexibility. These composite bows, constructed from laminated wood, horn, and sinew, generated significantly more power than simple wooden bows and could penetrate the bronze armor worn by Sumerian warriors. The composite bow's construction required specialized craftsmanship that combined materials with different physical properties to create weapons with superior performance characteristics. The wooden core provided structural stability, while horn strips on the belly of the bow compressed under tension to store additional energy. Sinew backing on the outer surface stretched during the draw cycle, contributing elastic power that increased arrow velocity and penetration capability. The assembly process involved careful layering of these materials with animal-based adhesives, followed by extended curing periods that could last several months. Akkadian archers underwent intensive training that emphasized accuracy, rapid shooting, and coordinated tactical movements that maximized their weapons' effectiveness. Unlike Sumerian warriors who fought primarily as individual champions, Akkadian forces operated as disciplined units that could concentrate their firepower on specific targets while maintaining formation cohesion. The siege of Uruk lasted several months and showcased Akkadian innovations in siege warfare that would become standard features of ancient military practice. Sargon's engineers constructed earthwork ramps that enabled attackers to approach city walls at elevated levels, while mobile siege towers provided protected platforms for archers to engage defenders. The systematic investment of the city prevented relief forces from reaching the defenders and gradually weakened their resolve through hunger and disease. The fall of Uruk sent shockwaves throughout the Sumerian world and demonstrated that traditional defensive strategies were inadequate against Akkadian military innovations. City walls that had previously provided reliable protection became obstacles that could be overcome through patient siege operations and superior military engineering. The psychological impact of Uruk's defeat encouraged other Sumerian cities to submit to Akkadian authority rather than face similar prolonged sieges that would devastate their populations and economies. Sargon's subsequent campaigns against Umma and Lagash followed similar patterns of systematic siege operations combined with diplomatic negotiations that offered favorable terms to cities that submitted voluntarily. This approach enabled rapid territorial expansion while minimizing the destruction that would have resulted from prolonged military resistance. Cities that accepted Akkadian rule retained their local institutions and religious practices while acknowledging Sargon's supreme authority and contributing military forces and tribute to support imperial administration. The conquest of the Sumerian heartland provided Sargon with the economic resources and administrative expertise necessary to extend Akkadian control throughout Mesopotamia and beyond. The agricultural surplus generated by Sumerian irrigation systems supported the large standing armies required for extended campaigns, while Sumerian scribal traditions provided bureaucratic capabilities for managing diverse territorial holdings. The integration of Akkadian military innovations with Sumerian administrative systems created a hybrid imperial structure that proved remarkably effective for governing multi-ethnic populations across vast distances. The establishment of Akkad as the imperial capital around 2330 BC marked the beginning of systematic imperial administration that would influence governmental practices throughout subsequent Mesopotamian history. Unlike previous Mesopotamian cities that had grown organically around religious centers, Akkad was planned as an administrative hub designed to coordinate imperial activities across extensive territories. The city featured specialized districts for different governmental functions, including military headquarters, diplomatic quarters, and archives for storing the massive documentation required for imperial management. The location of Akkad near the confluence of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers provided strategic advantages for controlling transportation and communication throughout the empire. River traffic carrying tribute, trade goods, and official correspondence converged at the capital, enabling central authorities to monitor economic activities and maintain contact with distant provinces. The city's position also facilitated the deployment of military forces to any threatened region within the empire, as troops could travel by river transport to reach most major population centers within reasonable time frames. Akkadian imperial administration incorporated Sumerian bureaucratic practices while adapting them to manage much larger and more diverse territories than any previous Mesopotamian state. Provincial governors, typically drawn from local elite families, maintained day-to-day administrative functions while reporting to Akkadian officials who ensured imperial policies were implemented consistently throughout the empire. This system balanced central control with local autonomy, enabling efficient governance while minimizing cultural conflicts that could destabilize imperial authority. The synthesis of Sumerian and Akkadian cultural traditions created new forms of artistic expression and intellectual achievement that reflected the cosmopolitan character of the empire. Akkadian sculptors adopted Sumerian artistic conventions while introducing stylistic innovations that emphasized individual personality and emotional expression. The famous bronze head discovered at Nineveh, possibly representing Sargon himself, demonstrates sophisticated casting techniques and artistic sensibilities that combined technical mastery with psychological insight. The adaptation of cuneiform writing to record the Akkadian language represented one of the most significant intellectual achievements of the imperial period. Sumerian cuneiform had been designed specifically for the Sumerian language, with its complex system of logographic and syllabic signs reflecting Sumerian grammatical structures and vocabulary. Akkadian, as a Semitic language, possessed fundamentally different grammatical patterns and phonetic characteristics that required substantial modifications to the existing writing system. Akkadian scribes solved this challenge by developing new conventions for representing Semitic grammatical features while retaining the basic cuneiform sign inventory inherited from Sumerian tradition. They created standardized methods for indicating verb conjugations, noun declensions, and other grammatical elements that had no direct equivalents in Sumerian. The resulting writing system maintained continuity with established Mesopotamian literary traditions while enabling the expression of Akkadian cultural concepts and administrative requirements. The bilingual character of Akkadian imperial administration necessitated the training of scribes who could function effectively in both Sumerian and Akkadian languages. Educational institutions throughout the empire developed curricula that combined traditional Sumerian literary texts with new Akkadian compositions, creating scholarly traditions that preserved ancient cultural heritage while adapting to contemporary needs. These educational programs produced generations of administrators who possessed the linguistic skills necessary for governing diverse populations and maintaining diplomatic relationships with foreign powers. Military innovations continued to evolve throughout Sargon's reign as Akkadian forces encountered different tactical challenges in various geographic regions. The conquest of territories extending from the Persian Gulf to Anatolia required adaptation to diverse terrain conditions and enemy capabilities that differed significantly from traditional Mesopotamian warfare. Mountain campaigns demanded different logistical arrangements and tactical approaches than operations in river valleys, while desert expeditions required specialized knowledge of navigation and water management. The development of organized standing armies represented a fundamental departure from previous Mesopotamian military practices that had relied primarily on seasonal levies and temporary alliances between city-states. Akkadian professional soldiers received regular pay and equipment from imperial resources, enabling them to dedicate themselves entirely to military service rather than dividing their time between farming and warfare. This professional military establishment provided the empire with rapid response capabilities and consistent tactical standards that could be maintained across diverse operational environments. The standardization of weapons and equipment throughout Akkadian forces facilitated logistics and maintenance while ensuring tactical compatibility between units drawn from different regions. Imperial armories produced bronze weapons according to standardized specifications, while specialized workshops manufactured composite bows with consistent performance characteristics. This systematic approach to military supply enabled the deployment of large forces over extended distances without compromising combat effectiveness through equipment shortages or incompatible weaponry. Sargon's campaigns beyond Mesopotamia extended Akkadian influence into regions that had previously maintained independence from any centralized authority. The conquest of Elam, located in the Zagros Mountains east of Mesopotamia, brought valuable mineral resources under imperial control while establishing strategic buffer zones against potential threats from the Iranian plateau. These mountain territories provided access to copper, silver, and precious stones that enhanced imperial wealth while supplying materials for expanded military production. The Western campaigns that brought Akkadian forces to the Mediterranean coast represented unprecedented territorial expansion that connected Mesopotamian civilization with entirely different cultural and economic systems. The conquest of Mari, located on the Middle Euphrates, provided control over crucial trade routes linking Mesopotamia with Anatolia and the Levant. The subjugation of territories in modern Syria and southeastern Turkey extended imperial boundaries to regions that had never experienced direct Mesopotamian political control. These extended campaigns required sophisticated logistical planning and diplomatic coordination that pushed Akkadian administrative capabilities to their limits. Supply lines extending hundreds of kilometers from the Mesopotamian heartland demanded careful management of transportation resources and strategic stockpiling of provisions at key locations. The integration of conquered territories with different agricultural systems and economic structures required flexible administrative approaches that could adapt imperial policies to local conditions. The reign of Naram-Sin, Sargon's grandson, who ruled from approximately 2254 to 2218 BC, marked the zenith of Akkadian imperial power and witnessed revolutionary developments in royal ideology that would influence Mesopotamian political concepts for millennia. Unlike his predecessors who had claimed divine sanction for their authority, Naram-Sin declared himself an actual god and demanded worship from his subjects as a living deity. This unprecedented assertion of divine kingship represented a fundamental departure from traditional Mesopotamian concepts of royal legitimacy. The deification of Naram-Sin found its most dramatic expression in his adoption of the horned crown, a divine symbol that had previously been reserved exclusively for representations of gods and goddesses. Royal inscriptions from his reign describe him as the god of Akkad and record temples constructed for his worship in various parts of the empire. This theological innovation reflected the enormous expansion of royal power that had occurred during the early imperial period and the need for new ideological frameworks to legitimize unprecedented territorial authority. The famous victory stele of Naram-Sin, discovered at Susa in western Iran, provides vivid documentation of this revolutionary royal ideology while demonstrating the artistic sophistication achieved during the Akkadian period. The monument depicts the king wearing the horned crown of divinity while leading his troops up a mountain slope toward defeated enemies. The composition breaks with traditional Mesopotamian artistic conventions by showing the king at a scale larger than other figures and positioning him in dynamic interaction with the landscape rather than in static ceremonial poses. The artistic innovations and divine royal ideology that reached their peak under Naram-Sin could not prevent the gradual weakening of Akkadian imperial control that became increasingly evident during the late 23rd century BC. The vast territorial extent of the empire strained administrative resources beyond sustainable limits, while prolonged military campaigns depleted the professional armies that had enabled initial conquest. Rebellions erupted throughout the empire as local populations, initially cowed by Akkadian military superiority, recognized that imperial forces were overextended and vulnerable to coordinated resistance. The Gutian invasions from the Zagros Mountains delivered the final blow to Akkadian power around 2154 BC. These nomadic peoples, whom Mesopotamian texts describe as fierce mountain warriors who knew no restraint, swept down from their highland territories to overrun the exhausted Akkadian armies. Unlike previous conflicts that had involved organized states with similar military technologies, the Gutian assault represented a collision between settled civilization and nomadic warrior culture that exposed fundamental weaknesses in imperial defensive systems. The Gutians possessed military advantages that proved devastatingly effective against traditional Mesopotamian forces. Their cavalry units, mounted on horses rather than the donkeys typically used by Mesopotamian armies, provided superior mobility and striking power that could overwhelm infantry formations before they could organize effective resistance. The nomadic lifestyle of Gutian warriors made them virtually immune to the siege tactics that had proven so successful in Akkadian campaigns against fortified cities, as they possessed no permanent settlements that could be captured or destroyed. The collapse of centralized Akkadian authority created a political vacuum that persisted for nearly a century, during which various city-states attempted to establish regional dominance, while Gutian raiders continued to threaten settled populations throughout Mesopotamia. This period of fragmentation, known traditionally as the Dark Age of Mesopotamian history, witnessed the destruction of many urban centers and the abandonment of extensive agricultural territories that could no longer be defended against nomadic incursions. The city of Lagash emerged as one of the few Sumerian centers to maintain effective governance during this chaotic period, largely through the leadership of Gudea, who ruled as governor from approximately 2144 to 2124 BC. Rather than attempting to restore imperial authority through military conquest, Gudea focused on internal development and diplomatic accommodation with Gutian leaders. This pragmatic approach enabled Lagash to preserve Sumerian cultural traditions and administrative practices while avoiding the destructive conflicts that devastated other regions. Gudea's building programs at Lagash demonstrate the remarkable resilience of Sumerian civilization despite the broader political collapse. His reconstruction of the Temple of Ningirsu incorporated architectural innovations that combined traditional Sumerian design principles with new decorative elements influenced by contact with foreign cultures. The temple complex featured elaborate sculptural programs that depicted the ruler in various ceremonial contexts, providing detailed visual records of Sumerian religious practices and royal ideology during this transitional period. The numerous statues of Gudea discovered at Lagash reveal sophisticated sculptural techniques that surpass the artistic achievements of the Akkadian period. These works, carved from imported diorite stone, demonstrate mastery of hard stone carving that required specialized tools and techniques. The realistic portrayal of facial features and clothing details reflects careful observation and artistic skill, while the inscriptions covering the statues preserve extensive information about temple construction, religious ceremonies, and administrative practices. The gradual weakening of Gutian control during the early 22nd century BC created opportunities for Sumerian cities to reassert their independence and begin the process of political reunification. The expulsion of Gutian forces from central Mesopotamia required coordinated military action by several city-states working in alliance, marking the beginning of a remarkable cultural and political revival that would restore Sumerian civilization to unprecedented heights of achievement. Ur-Nammu, who established the third dynasty of Ur around 2112 BC, emerged as the architect of the Sumerian Renaissance through a combination of military prowess, administrative innovation, and cultural patronage that synthesized the best elements of previous Mesopotamian civilizations. His origins as governor of Ur under the last Sumerian king of Uruk provided him with intimate knowledge of both local administration and broader regional politics, enabling him to develop strategies that addressed the complex challenges of post-imperial reconstruction. The military campaigns that established Ur-Nemmu's authority throughout Sumer required tactical innovations that could overcome both residual Gutian forces and rival Sumerian city-states that had grown accustomed to independence during the preceding century of fragmentation. Rather than relying solely on traditional infantry formations, Ur-Nemmu's armies incorporated mobile units equipped with improved bronze weapons and organized according to standardized tactical doctrines that maximized coordination between different military specialties. The Siege of Uruk, which brought the most prestigious Sumerian city under Ur-Nemmu's control, demonstrated the sophisticated military engineering capabilities that characterized Neo-Sumerian warfare. Ur-Nemmu's forces constructed elaborate circumvallation works that completely surrounded the city, preventing relief forces from reaching the defenders while maintaining supply lines for the besieging army. These engineering projects required precise surveying and construction techniques that reflected the revival of technical expertise that had been disrupted during the Gutian period. The restoration of unified Sumerian control enabled Ur-Nemmu to implement comprehensive administrative reforms that addressed the institutional weaknesses that had contributed to the Akkadian collapse. Rather than attempting to govern vast territories through centralized imperial bureaucracy, the Neo-Sumerian system balanced central authority with substantial local autonomy that enabled efficient administration while reducing the administrative burden on royal resources. The Code of Ur-Nemmu, promulgated around 2100 BC, represents the earliest comprehensive legal system in human history and established precedents for jurisprudence that would influence legal development throughout the ancient world. Unlike later legal codes that focused primarily on criminal penalties, Ur-Nemmu's legislation addressed civil disputes, commercial transactions, and family relationships that required standardized procedures for resolution. The code's emphasis on monetary compensation rather than physical punishment reflected sophisticated understanding of social relationships and economic principles. The legal provisions governing agricultural disputes reveal the complex property relationships that had developed in Sumerian society by the late 3rd millennium BC. The code established procedures for resolving conflicts over irrigation rights, field boundaries, and crop-sharing arrangements that reflected the intensive agricultural systems supporting Neo-Sumerian urban centers. These regulations required precise measurement techniques and standardized valuation methods that enabled consistent application across different regions and circumstances. Commercial law provisions in Ur-Nemmu's code addressed the expanded trade relationships that connected Neo-Sumerian cities with distant regions throughout the Near East and beyond. Regulations governing contract enforcement, debt collection, and partnership agreements provided legal frameworks that enabled merchants to engage in complex long-distance transactions with reasonable assurance that their investments would be protected. The standardization of weights, measures, and currency values facilitated interregional commerce while reducing disputes over measurement and valuation. The code's family law provisions reflected the relatively high status of women in Neo-Sumerian society while establishing clear procedures for marriage, divorce, and inheritance that protected the interests of all family members. Women retained property rights after marriage and could initiate divorce proceedings under specified circumstances, indicating legal recognition of female agency that distinguished Sumerian law from many later legal traditions. The detailed regulations governing inheritance rights of children, spouses, and extended family members provided stability for family relationships while preventing conflicts that could destabilize social order. The implementation of Ur-Nemmu's legal code required the development of professional judicial institutions staffed by trained legal specialists who possessed detailed knowledge of statutory provisions and precedent cases. Court records from Neo-Sumerian cities reveal sophisticated legal procedures that included witness testimony, documentary evidence, and standardized forms of legal argumentation. These judicial systems provided accessible mechanisms for dispute resolution that reduced reliance on traditional kinship-based methods of conflict management. The administrative innovations introduced during Ur-Nammu's reign extended far beyond legal reform to encompass comprehensive reorganization of governmental institutions and procedures. The establishment of standardized weights and measures throughout the Neo-Sumerian state eliminated the confusion and fraud that had characterized commercial transactions during the period of political fragmentation. Royal workshops produced bronze weight standards according to precise specifications, while official measuring vessels ensured consistency in grain transactions and tax assessments. The development of sophisticated record-keeping systems enabled Neo-Sumerian administrators to manage complex governmental functions with unprecedented efficiency and accuracy. Thousands of cuneiform tablets from administrative archives record transactions involving agricultural production, craft manufacturing, labor assignments, and military provisioning with remarkable detail and precision. These documents reveal mathematical capabilities and organizational methods that surpass the achievements of earlier Mesopotamian civilizations. The administrative archives from Drayam, a specialized livestock management center established during Ur-Nammu's reign, provide extraordinary insight into the systematic organization of Neo-Sumerian economic activities. This facility processed tens of thousands of cattle, sheep, and goats annually for redistribution to temples, government offices, and military units throughout the kingdom. The detailed records of animal receipts, processing, and distribution demonstrate logistical capabilities that enabled efficient resource management across extensive territories. The construction projects initiated under Ur-Nammu's patronage required coordination of massive labor forces and material resources that tested the limits of Neo-Sumerian administrative capabilities. The Great Ziggurat of Ur, begun during his reign and completed under his successor Shulgi, incorporated approximately 720,000 baked bricks and required the labor of thousands of workers over several construction seasons. The precise planning and execution of such projects demanded sophisticated project management techniques and quality control procedures. The ziggurat's construction revealed advanced understanding of structural engineering principles that enabled the creation of stable multi-story buildings using mud brick construction techniques. The builders incorporated drainage systems within the structure to prevent water damage, while carefully calculated foundation systems distributed the enormous weight of the superstructure across stable soil conditions. The standardization of brick dimensions and construction methods enabled different work crews to contribute compatible components to the overall project. The reign of Shulgi, Ur-Nammu's son, who ruled from 2094 to 2047 BC, witnessed the full flowering of Neo-Sumerian civilization and the achievement of administrative sophistication that would not be equaled in Mesopotamia for many centuries. Shulgi's 47-year reign provided the stability necessary for long-term development projects while enabling the refinement of governmental institutions and cultural practices that had been established during his father's more turbulent period of initial conquest and consolidation. The military reforms implemented during Shulgi's reign transformed the Neo-Sumerian army from a traditional levy-based force into a professional military establishment capable of sustained operations across vast distances. Professional soldiers received standardized equipment and training that enabled tactical coordination between units drawn from different regions, while specialized engineering corps provided siege capabilities and logistical support for extended campaigns. The establishment of permanent garrisons in frontier regions provided early warning of potential threats while maintaining imperial authority in distant territories. The expansion of Neo-Sumerian control during Shulgi's reign extended imperial boundaries to their greatest extent, encompassing territories from the Persian Gulf to the Zagros Mountains and from the Syrian desert to the Iranian plateau. This territorial expansion required diplomatic as well as military initiatives, as Shulgi negotiated alliance agreements with local rulers who maintained nominal independence while acknowledging Neo-Sumerian supremacy. These diplomatic arrangements reduced the military burden of imperial defense while providing access to regional resources and trade routes. The cultural achievements of Shulgi's reign included patronage of literary and scholarly activities that produced some of the finest examples of Sumerian literature. The standardization of scribal education throughout the Neo-Sumerian state created shared cultural standards and literary traditions that unified educated elites across diverse regional populations. Temple schools and palace academies developed curricula that combined traditional Sumerian texts with new compositions celebrating contemporary achievements and royal ideology. The Gilgamesh epic, which achieved its classic form during this period, represents the culmination of Mesopotamian literary development and demonstrates the sophisticated narrative techniques and thematic complexity that characterized Neo-Sumerian cultural achievements. The epic's exploration of themes including friendship, mortality, and the relationship between civilization and nature reflected the intellectual sophistication of Neo-Sumerian society while preserving ancient cultural traditions in forms that would influence literature throughout subsequent history. The administrative systems and cultural achievements that characterized Shulgi's reign could not prevent the gradual erosion of Neo-Sumerian power that became increasingly evident during the final decades of the Third Dynasty of Ur. The enormous territorial extent of the empire strained resources beyond sustainable limits, while the professional military establishment that had enabled territorial expansion consumed ever larger portions of imperial revenue. Simultaneously, Amorite nomadic groups from the Syrian desert began infiltrating Mesopotamian territories in increasing numbers, establishing settlements that challenged traditional patterns of urban control over agricultural resources. The Amorites possessed distinct cultural characteristics that distinguished them from both Sumerians and Akkadians, though they readily adopted aspects of Mesopotamian civilization while maintaining their tribal social organization and pastoral economic practices. These Semitic-speaking peoples had been present on the margins of Mesopotamian civilization for centuries, serving as traders, mercenaries, and seasonal laborers who moved between desert camps and urban centers according to economic opportunities and climatic conditions. Their gradual transition from nomadic to settled existence occurred through incremental processes of cultural adaptation rather than sudden conquest or displacement. The weakening of central authority during the reign of Ibbi-Sin, the last king of the Third Dynasty of Ur, who ruled from 2028 to 2004 BC, created opportunities for ambitious Amorite leaders to establish independent principalities in regions that had previously acknowledged Neo-Sumerian supremacy. Unlike the Gutian invasions that had destroyed the Akkadian Empire through military conquest, the Amorite expansion occurred primarily through peaceful infiltration and gradual assumption of local authority as imperial control weakened. The city of Babylon emerged as the most successful of these Amorite principalities under the leadership of Sumuabum, who established the first dynasty of Babylon around 1894 BC. The strategic location of Babylon on the Euphrates River, approximately 85 kilometers south of modern Baghdad, provided access to both northern and southern Mesopotamian territories while controlling crucial transportation routes that connected the region with Syria and Anatolia. This geographic advantage enabled the early Babylonian rulers to develop commercial relationships and military alliances that gradually expanded their territorial control. Sumuabum's successors systematically expanded Babylonian authority through a combination of military conquest, diplomatic negotiation, and economic pressure that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of the complex political dynamics that had emerged following the collapse of unified imperial control. Rather than attempting immediate restoration of empire-wide authority, these rulers focused on consolidating control over strategically important territories while building the administrative and military capabilities necessary for eventual broader expansion. The reign of Simubalit, who ruled from 1812 to 1793 BC, marked a crucial phase in Babylonian territorial expansion through successful campaigns against rival city-states that had maintained independence since the fall of the Third Dynasty of Ur. His conquest of Sippar, located north of Babylon, provided control over important agricultural territories and trade routes connecting central Mesopotamia with Anatolia. The integration of Sippar's administrative systems and economic resources strengthened Babylonian military capabilities while providing experienced personnel for expanded governmental operations. The diplomatic initiatives undertaken during Simubalat's reign established alliance relationships with other Amorite rulers who controlled territories throughout Mesopotamia and Syria. These agreements facilitated commercial exchanges while creating military partnerships that enabled coordinated resistance against external threats. The marriage of Simubalat's son to the daughter of a Syrian Amorite ruler exemplified the diplomatic strategies that bound together the emerging Amorite political network through kinship relationships and mutual obligations. Simubalat's military campaigns against the city-state of Kazalu demonstrated the tactical innovations that characterized early Babylonian warfare. Rather than relying on traditional siege methods that required extended investment of enemy cities, Babylonian forces developed mobile tactics that emphasized rapid movement and concentrated attacks on vulnerable points in enemy defenses. These tactical approaches reduced the logistical burden of military operations while enabling more flexible responses to changing battlefield conditions. The death of Simubalat in 1793 BC brought his son Hammurabi to the throne of Babylon at a time when the political landscape of Mesopotamia was dominated by competition between several major powers, each controlling significant territories and possessing substantial military capabilities. The Kingdom of Mari, located on the Middle Euphrates, controlled crucial trade routes connecting Mesopotamia with Syria and Anatolia while maintaining diplomatic relationships with powers throughout the ancient Near East. The Kingdom of Larsa, in southern Mesopotamia, had successfully unified much of the former Sumerian heartland under the leadership of energetic Amorite rulers who combined military prowess with sophisticated administrative capabilities. The Kingdom of Eshnunna, located in the Diyala River Valley east of Babylon, controlled territories that provided access to Iranian mineral resources while maintaining strategic positions along trade routes connecting Mesopotamia with the Iranian plateau. The Elamite Kingdom, based in the Zagros Mountains, possessed military capabilities that enabled periodic intervention in Mesopotamian affairs while controlling mountain territories rich in metals and other valuable resources.